This is the story of the last battle fought by an American Civil War widow. On July 3, 1863, Confederate General James Longstreet led his men into battle at the pivotal Battle of Gettysburg. A year later, on July 3, 1864, Longstreet would lead his men into battle again, but this time he was fighting for the other side. By that time, the war was effectively over. Lincoln had been re-elected in November of the previous year, and in March of 1865, General Lee had surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox. But the war did not end for everyone, and the battle fought on this day in 1864 is proof of that. Before we get started, alright, back to the video. So why were soldiers still fighting? Well, there were several reasons. First off, news traveled slow in those days. It took weeks for news to spread from one area to another, so some soldiers were just hearing about the surrender at Appomattox. And because there were so few Union troops in the southernmost parts of Virginia, where news traveled more slowly, many Confederate soldiers just didn't know the war was over. And even if they did, they probably thought it would be better to surrender to their local commanders than travel all the way to Appomattox to meet with General Lee. But that's not the case today. This battle was fought in Texas, specifically on the banks of the Washita River in what is now western Oklahoma. The last battle of the Civil War was also the last battle fought by one man's mother. His name is John William Deering, and he was born in August of 1842. His father was an Irish immigrant who served in the U.S. Army under General Andrew Jackson in the war with the South. When his father died when John was only 9 years old, his mother Elizabeth became the matriarch of the family. She owned a farm on the Washita River in what was then known as the Texas Panhandle. But unfortunately, she also owned 2 slaves, which forced her family to join the Confederacy. When Texas seceded from the Union in February of 1861, John wanted to join the army, but he was too young to enlist. He lied about his age and told the recruiter he was old enough to fight, but he was rejected. Several months later, news broke that Confederate forces had won a major victory at the Battle of Galveston. John watched as young boys from his community left to go celebrate. He was jealous that he couldn't join them, but soon enough he got his chance. The next day he found some older boys and told them he was going to try to run away from home to join the army. They told him he could sneak onto the train with them. Later that night, he snuck onto a freight train carrying cotton and supplies and headed north to the city of Austin. When he arrived, he went to the local recruitment office, gave them the name of his father, and enlisted in the army as a substitute. Just like that, the 18-year-old John was in the Confederate Army. He was assigned to Company D of the 4th Texas Infantry Regiment and soon headed out to join the rest of his unit. For the next 2 years, he marched alongside his unit, first through Arkansas and then through Missouri. He participated in the Battle of Wilson's Creek, the Siege of Springfield, the Battle of Pea Ridge, and the Battle of Little Blue. During those battles, he saw friends and family get killed around him. He got shot in the foot at the Battle of Lone Jack and was captured and imprisoned at the infamous Camp Douglas in Chicago. He spent 6 months in that prison before being exchanged for a Union soldier. Then he returned to his regiment, albeit a bit older and a lot more mature. His unit eventually made it all the way south to Texas, where it became part of General Magruder's cavalry regiment stationed in Louisiana. Soon General Banks was leading his Union troops up from the south and General Taylor was ordered to stop him. John rode alongside his fellow Confederates in a charge against the Union forces, but the cavalry charge failed and his horse was killed beneath him. He hid in the tall grass and watched as the Union troops rode away. The next day, his captain, Captain Dick Doling, gathered any remaining Confederate soldiers and charged forward anyway. At the end of that day, only Captain Dowling, John, and 4 other soldiers remained. They retreated to a nearby ranch and began to lay low. As the war drug on, John traveled home to visit his mother. He stayed there for a while until he heard that Union troops were advancing closer and closer to his mother's house. He knew the Union troops would kill or capture anyone who lived there who was able to fight, so he decided to leave. He said goodbye to his mother, promising he would return as soon as the war was over. Then he joined Captain Dowling and the others in the small town of Dune City, Texas. There he found the rest of his regiment, which had been mostly made up of boys who ran away from home, much like he had done 2 years earlier. But he also learned that the war was over. President Lincoln had been re-elected in November of 1864, and just a month ago, General Lee had surrendered to General Grant. But even after receiving that news, orders came down that they must continue to fight until either they or the remaining Confederates in the West surrendered. On July, he and the rest of his unit were ordered to march out into the plains and find and fight any Union soldiers they could find. There weren't any Union soldiers, but they did find some abandoned wagons and supplies that they brought back to their camp. That night, the men talked amongst themselves about what they would do once the war was officially over. Many of them wanted to head north and start new lives. Then the next morning, July 3rd, 1865, the men were awakened to the sound of distant gunfire. They grabbed their rifles and headed toward the noise. As they approached to the river, they saw 5 Union soldiers who had stumbled upon the campsite, killed several of their comrades, and stolen their supplies. The Texans fired upon them, killing one and forcing the others to retreat across the river. The Texans wasted no time organizing themselves into a small battle group and crossed the river to retrieve their supplies and avenge their dead. The Confederates quickly found the Union soldiers hiding in the tall grasses on the other side of the river. The soldiers opened fire, killing 3 of the 5 attackers, but the Confederates kept coming and the other 2 soldiers were killed soon after. Once the dust settled, the Confederates searched the bodies of the fallen Union soldiers and realized that they were part of the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry Regiment, the same regiment that had attacked and killed several of their comrades. The men of Company D returned to their camp with their supplies and prepared to move out the following morning. But that night, as they sat around the campfire, they discussed what they had done and what they would be doing come morning. They wrote letters to their family and friends saying goodbye. They talked about how they would never forget the men who had died that day. Then they shared what little food they had left and waited for sunrise. As the sun rose on July 4th, 18, the men of Company D prepared to bury the 5 Union soldiers who had died in the skirmish. The men dug a large hole, laid the bodies inside, and then covered them with the soil. The Texans stood around the grave, mourning the loss of life on both sides of the conflict. Then they placed a makeshift headstone at the site, marking the final resting place of the unknown Union soldiers. Finally, the men packed up their belongings, mounted their horses, and headed out. One by one, they rode off into the distance, never to be seen by each other again. Today, you can visit the Washita Battlefield Park to learn about the last battle of the Civil War. There is a small museum, a hiking trail, a picnic area, and a memorial to the 5 unknown Union soldiers who died here. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stay tuned.